And I've got Vlad, the co-founder of Full Funnel, on with me. Finally, we reunite after, I don't know, it seems like a year or so. How's it going, my friend?
Very good, very good. A bit hot here, but otherwise,
Yeah, and I feel
thanks for
bad because I
having
was
me.
actually out your way. Because you're in, what part of Spain are you in? Valencia.
Valencia, Spain. That's the
So I
east
wasn't far
coast.
from you.
Yeah.
We were on kind of a personal vacation trip. I went out to Madrid 3 or 4 weeks ago, and so we were out there.
Yeah, that's like 2 hours,
Easy.
2 hours train ride. I don't know, or 3 hours with a
Yeah,
car from Valencia. It's a
I
pity.
know,
It's
I
a
know.
pity. Gaetano Di Nardi was also here.
Oh,
I just
really?
learned and reached out to him, and he was going back. I mean, he was going back. He was also in Madrid. Everybody
Yeah.
goes to Madrid. They don't know where the best
Exactly,
place is.
exactly. And I've been to Valencia.
Hopefully,
Valencia is beautiful. I love it. Well,
I've been.
I used to live in
Oh
Spain. I
man.
was there for 2 years or so. So I traveled all around Spain, but regrettably, the only two spots I didn't go to were Granada and Sevilla, which are probably the other two most traveled spots in Spain. And I don't know, I just didn't get to it. But we just had a big trip in Switzerland, so we were going all over the place. But next time I'm there, which we will be back, because I have a soft spot for Spain. So we'll definitely have to do it again. But
Awesome.
well, real quick before we get into it, because I think you said this before, and I think it's a really good point, so people get some context. But we're going to be talking obviously about a couple of different things here. One being, how to better align with how buyers want to buy, right? And rethinking about the buyer journey because it has changed over the years. And so there's some things to call out. Talking about random acts of marketing or kind of one-off campaigns versus always on demand gen programs. I know we wanted to get into that. And then potentially we have time, we'll see, but talk a little bit about a kind of like marketing and sales alignments, potential challenges, issues there, and then how we ultimately measure some of these things, because not everything should be measured the same way with the same lens, because some campaigns or some programs have different time frames in order to drive results. And so we need to be aware of those things. But I thought before we get into all that, is kind of a quick agenda for you to just kind of give like a brief kind of summary of Full Funnel real quick, and then also context of some of the companies you work with, because I think that's really going to be important to frame this up, because anything that you're talking about is probably going to be within that frame. So you want to maybe we start there and then we can go from there?
Absolutely. I think it's really important to understand that everything we were talking about is relevant for B2B companies, usually B2B tech, B2B SaaS, other tech companies that sell, let's say, high 5-figure, 6 and 7-figure deals. So we are talking about more complex sales. We're talking usually about upper mid-market or enterprise marketing, which is different. You have more buyers, you have more complex process, and your marketing needs to adapt if you want to be successful. And so what we do with Full Funnel is we consult companies like that and help them implement what we call full funnel account-based marketing and demand generation, which is just to say implement a program that actually covers the complete buyer journey instead of just doing, let's say, top of funnel or just demand capture, or what we often see is the case in reality.
Yeah.
In
And I think
practice.
the thing I like that you guys do a lot of is you guys go very deep into making sure we're understanding who we're targeting and going after, which is literally one of the fundamental elements of what makes a successful marketing program. Because if you get those elements wrong, then you can be led astray. And so I know you guys have posted some awesome content on ways to find your ICP, things to think about, data to use from your CRM and other places to make sure they're really nailing it, which I'm a huge fan of.
No, it's like everybody talks about ideal customer profile. Everybody understands that you should be researching your customer. I think this is kind of a topic that you see very
Always.
often. But when it comes to like really nailing your ICP, I think there's a couple of things that you don't really see very often. And the first one is that, when companies will do, especially, of course, when you're doing paid, you're also limited to what you can, how you can specify your audience on the platform, whatever platform that you're using. So kind of people start thinking about the audience and the audience definition, ideal customer profile, simply in terms of a couple of geographies, firmographics. Okay, I'm targeting B2B SaaS companies from North America of whatever, 500 to 5,000 people, employees, and I'm targeting, let's say, VP of marketing and CMO, right? And that's it. That's the ideal customer profile for a lot of companies. And it's already pretty good. I think you will also see a lot of companies that also add in a bunch of other industries. Maybe, yeah, they could also benefit from our product, et cetera,
Sure.
et cetera. But really what's important to understand is, especially when you're selling to enterprise, right? So you can spend, most of the companies can't afford to spend, let's say, 6, 9, 12, 18 months chasing deals that maybe have 10% chance of closing. I think this is kind of the key, right? So especially when it's so complex, when it takes so much time, when you have long sales cycles, and you are going to spend a lot of effort, right? As sales, you're going to spend a lot of effort with your team. So you want to make sure that you're going after companies that actually have a need for your product, that actually have reasonable chance of closing, instead of going for, let's say, wish list of accounts. And to be able to do that, you really have to kind of go beyond just those firmographics. So what are the characteristics of our best customers? So very concretely, here's what I mean. Let's say you take you study the revenue from the last 2 years, and you see that you have a lot of success in, let's say, the manufacturing segment, companies above whatever 100 million in revenue. I don't know, like basic firmographics. But then let's say you're selling some sort of fintech, right? And fintech solution to help these manufacturing companies manage currency risk. I don't know, right? So what are some other important criteria for you? Well, it could be they need to have low margin because they don't have so much room to lose on the currency exchange. Obviously, because we are talking about currency exchange, we need to only target companies that have a lot of export, and they are exporting not like, let's say, from a European country to a European country or between states, right? We need multi-currency export. So these are the examples. And then there is another thing that very often comes and that not a lot of companies think about, and that is the disqualification criteria, right? And when it comes to disqualification criteria, again, using the same example of that fintech company selling into manufacturing, well, maybe when the CFO comes into the company, right, like during the first quarter or two, maybe that's not just the right time to sell. Or maybe if they're very long in the company, they have all their processes and tools already figured out. And again, it may not be the right moment to sell. So this could be example of disqualification criteria. And the way that you figure them out is simply by going into those largest won deals from those target segments, and first of all talking with your sales, studying what's kind of the common patterns, and then also lost deals to identify those disqualification criteria. And ultimately, of course, also having a chat with the customers, because the problem is you only kind of have a limited view of the buying journey. A lot of, especially enterprise companies that I speak to, and you're talking to account executives, they're kind of there from the moment that the company's already like made a decision, kind of already made a pre-selection, and they're speaking to the IE, and in a lot of cases they're kind of order taker, like, okay, so there is an order, and okay, and of course I still have to win the deal, and a lot of them are doing an amazing work, but at the end, I mean, especially enterprise, it's not, I wouldn't be surprised to see that they're only talking to procurement. An actual decision maker is behind. They don't know what's going on, right? That's actually not uncommon, right? And that's why it's so important also to go out and, as much as possible, also speak to the customers to really understand everybody who is involved. Also, like what is happening in that business before they reach out to you as a vendor, and all of these things. So, kind of to sum it up, when you look at the ICP, I think what's important is to really identify realistic companies that will have a need and you can realistically close, going beyond just the firmographics, understanding the full buying committee beyond, let's say, the procurement or whomever you're having the conversation with, and also understanding the buyer journey beyond, again, that stage at which they're basically just comparing the different vendors and deciding whether they will work for you, where you're actually closing the deal. Hope that
I
makes
think you
sense.
nailed it. Yeah. And I think for anyone listening, you got a sneak peek into what it's like to work with you all in terms of how detailed you guys are in getting into that ICP, which I think is so important because you're right. It's not just company size, revenue, titles. All right, let's go. We're ready. We've got our ICP down. There's so many other
Yeah.
criteria that are involved that can make it a lot more specific. And so that'll help ultimately that program succeed. But I wanted to go back on a point because I think this is a good transition to getting back to kind of the core topic of how to align with buyers and the way that they buy today. But you said, A's sometimes already have the selection. So when buyers rather are coming in to talk to A's, a lot of times that buyers already got a lot of their mind made up. And so I think this relates to directly to some of the things that have been happening with the way that we buy. And so this goes back a while, right? But if you go pre-social media, right, which is a long time ago now, pre-social media, there wasn't as much information that was on the internet. You had search, you had to pretty much go out and talk to a sales rep to get information about the product, the pricing, or frankly a lot of other detail. There just wasn't as much information out there and not enough areas and channels and communities of which you can go to talk to other people that are like you. Now, post social media, clearly we have tons of channels and there's ever growing amounts of communities, groups, different places where people are aggregating where they're already getting that information. And so back to your point is I think what's happened, and I'll be curious your thoughts too and the way you see this, but for me, what I see is that you've got a much more empowered customer. They've got so much more information. Even if your pricing is not transparent, they're asking other customers, they're in communities, they're in groups, they're figuring it out. If you don't have a product tour, they're talking to other customers again. They're looking at YouTube, they're finding people that are reviewing products or influencers that are being paid potentially from an affiliate standpoint. And so they're finding all sorts of ways to get the information they need because they want to feel certain that when they do reach out and they talk to sales, that they get the information they need. So to your point, sales a lot of times, while still really, really important to the organization, when things are coming inbound, ideally, like those buyers are already ready to go and there's not as much selling to be done because they've already done so much of that research before. And so what is your kind of thought process on that? I mean, maybe we could even talk back about, the why the journey has changed. Is this a recent phenomenon? Is this been going on for a while and companies have just been kind of slow to adapt to it? What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think that the journey has been changing for a while. I remember the first time HubSpot came out and started to promote inbound as the new thing, or as how they were positioning their narrative. They were talking about the changed buyer journey already back then. What was that? Middle of
Long time ago.
2000.
Yeah.
And the journey has been changing since then, for sure. And I think we had a big change late, with COVID, when a lot of people stayed at home, a lot of people were forced to use more the online channels. But I think there is another thing. I mean, since maybe 2011, I think a lot of people have heard about this. Like since 2011, if you just look at the Martech, there have been like whatever 150 startups back then, and now they're what is it now?
Th-
I don't know,
Thousands.
9,000. Like
Who knows? Too
incredible,
many.
right?
Yeah.
Now, what happened as well as a consequence is that you have not just so much more competition in terms of the different solutions that you can select, but you also have so much more information out there, right? And so much more noise. But I think what's happening as well is that the buyers, because a lot of these companies are maybe using outbound tactics, maybe they are using whatever other tactics or strategies they're using, I think that even though there is more information, more startups, and all of these things, that the buyer trust has been going down. So I think it's also true to say that buyers don't really believe the vendors as much as they believe their peers. I'm sure that this is true today as it was before, maybe even more so. And this is what you were, to what you were saying, that we have now peer communities, we are connected to each other on LinkedIn. We just know each other basically
Mm.
from LinkedIn, right? And I would trust your recommendation 10, if not 100 times more. Let's say if I'm choosing a Martech solution, then I would trust the website of the vendor. I would always assume their copy, their information is always going to be self-serving, tainted, right? They always, of course,
Mm.
have their agenda, and the agenda is to sell to me, right? So I think that's another thing that's going on. So Now we have this possibility to connect to peers, ask them, not just ask them or learn from them, etc. And I think maybe just one more thing to add to the change in the buyer journey and how that impacts our marketing is what I kind of briefly mentioned as well. Um, we are always talking about buyer journey from the moment people start looking for solutions, but of course, buyer journey actually starts before, right? So maybe people coming to us for, let's say, our ABM consulting, well, I mean, and they say, okay, what is your need? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to solve for? And okay, we need more marketing impact on pipeline. We need to move up market, whatever their challenge is. But has that challenge, is that something new for them? Well, probably not. And I think this is another thing that people should realize, that just because, let's say, I'm a marketer and I don't know, I need to increase, let's say, marketing source revenue, and this is my problem, let's say, of every marketer, that I have that challenge doesn't mean that I'm buying a solution for it, right? I think like everybody has issues and challenges and things that can go better. And it's actually our job to deal with all of that,
Mm.
right? It's that's why we are paid, yeah, right? And I think what people don't understand, it's something has to happen inside of that business. You might call this a trigger, buying trigger or a business trigger, right? Maybe actually that's not uncommon in the case of our clients. Maybe they just had a quarterly review or an annual review, and they realized that they've generated a bunch of MQLs that never closed, right? You posted the other day about all the different reasons that MQLs don't convert into revenue. I'm sure your audience has heard a lot about it, but that's now an event that happened in the company, and maybe their CEO or CRO, whomever, said, okay, we absolutely need to do something about it. We need to make sure that marketing is driving more revenue. Okay, so now suddenly you have that external or internal in this case event, so this buying trigger that makes these challenges and opportunities a priority. And that's where actually the buying journey starts. And so I think it's really important to realize that, because a lot of the content and activities that you should be including in your marketing should be dealing with that stage, with that kind of pre-buying stage, before the trigger. So being there on their radar, because you never know when they will start to buy, but being there on their radar, creating awareness, educating the buyers so that you're kind of top of their mind once they decide to start buying. And a big advantage of doing it like that is that now you can frame the conversation. Now you can even impact maybe their purchase criteria, because you start educating them about the good way of doing things and the bad way of doing things, right? And all of that stuff. So just to sum it up, right? So when it comes to the buyer journey, there is a big part of the buyer journey that a lot of us are not aware of. Unless we talk to the customers, we are not aware of everything that was happening before they reached our sales, before they filled out that form on our website. And second, that's also why we need to be thinking about how can I generate awareness and maybe drive a bit of demand, and maybe even actually create the demand, and maybe be part of that trigger, making them aware of how does, I think Josh Brown talks about making them aware of the problems that they didn't know they
Right.
had, or the opportunity that they weren't aware of, and actually starting to actually create the demand
Yeah,
there.
I think you said it well. I mean, yeah, Josh Brown, I love his stuff. He's a smart dude, and I love his content. But yeah, I think some of this
He's
stuff is
excellent.
really just putting yourselves in the shoe of the buyer, right? And I think there's a lot of things that we talk about all day long on LinkedIn, and I'm sure happening outside of LinkedIn too, where it's like if you were just to take a step back and look at the various things that happen across the journey that people take getting to know your brand, and you just say, if I was the buyer, is that an experience that I would like? You would probably find that there's a variety of different things that are really not that well aligned with the buyer. And the ones that we talk about all the time are the typical things, right? It's lack of a calendar booking tool, inability to actually see the product before you actually come in to get a demo, whether it be a tour, a video, even a small little GIF or something that just kind of helps people visualize like what this is going to be. Transparent pricing, all the typical things that we hear all the time. And everyone loves to talk about them over and over again because, unfortunately, there still are a lot of SaaS companies that still need help in these three areas. So while it sounds like old news to us, people that are on LinkedIn all the time, they are still realities I know that I talk with some of our current clients about regularly that still have not taken action on some of these things. And so I think it just requires looking at that journey, which I know you guys do always a great job about in terms of mapping like, hey, maybe people don't go down the funnel in a linear fashion, right? But they still go down. Or down, left, right, or whatever way you want to put it. They move from being ultimately problem unaware to problem aware to solution aware and so on and so forth, right? And so we just need to make sure that we've got content, answers to those questions, and whatever things they're looking to solve answered, whether it be on our website and social media through ads and all sorts of other mediums where they're hanging out. And so to me, like that's a big thing and an exercise I know we do all the time. And then to say one last point, I'll stop and let you comment on any of that. But the other thing I wrote a note on as you were talking about some things related to buyer journey was on the ad side. One of the things that we always see too is that you'll get these people. Everyone thinks of paid ads in this kind of direct response nature, like, hey, I'm going to put an ad up, I'm going to get a click, I'm going to go to the landing page, they convert, right? But you and I both know that like when we're especially running either ABM motions or we're talking about bigger ACV, like 30, 40, 50, 100K plus transactions, people don't buy that way. They don't see an ad, click it, and then decide to come in for a demo immediately. There's many other things that are happening along that journey. And to look at it just from a last touch perspective is just such a limited view. And then the other thing to that too is that once you open up your mind, you say, well, wait a minute. Yeah, of course, I want people to obviously interact, engage on my ads. I want them to like the content I'm putting out there. But what if you start freeing yourself from that a little bit? And I know that Amanda over at Spark Tourist talked about this. I have too, but we call them zero-click ads. She calls it zero-click content. And this isn't a new thing. I think it just is a nice name to put a name on it. But it's something that I think we don't think about enough, which is ultimately, how do we get such good content, like the content that you and Andre put out on LinkedIn, where you guys are optimizing for in-channel consumption. You're not sending all the traffic directly back to full funnel. I can look through a 50-page carousel that you guys put together that's packed with tons of information, or a text-based poster or whatever. And the same thing could be true with ads, but there's still so few people that really take those steps to create that type of content that could even be put into that format. So I'll stop myself there and let you comment, but those are some things that I know are very top of mind that we talk about with our clients quite a bit on the buyer journey.
No, I love it. And I think you definitely nailed it when it comes to the friction and removing the friction. A lot of times these are the kind of the quick wins that you can make, right? And have a big impact with not necessarily having to spend a lot of time doing that.
Yeah.
But also like just thinking about this experience from your own perspective, I think that makes a lot of sense, because like if you really think about it, the way that it looks like is, okay, I go to the vendor side, I have to click away the cookie warning and maybe the banner promoting an event. Then I have to maybe stop the slider,
exactly.
slice the different values propositions because they couldn't like come up with one, right? And then I have to like find a way to read it. And if I'm on a mobile, I'll already probably have to give up on that, right? And then just when I'm trying to understand, their vague value proposition, a chatbot comes up asking me if I had any questions before I even had the chance to read that. And then I go down and I start to actually, what I want, like you said, is I want to understand what the bloody product does, right? What does it do? How does it work? And then they have this like vague benefit-driven copy, which is like just sounds like everybody else, and it doesn't tell me what it does, and it still doesn't tell me what it does. And then then maybe I get frustrated and I say that, oh, maybe I should just do the chatbot. But then on the chatbot, they don't really answer. No, they want to get you in the funnel, right? Okay, so maybe you still kind of give in their funnel, and you give your email address and you say, bloody damn, let me book that demo, right? And then still it's not over, because you still have to maybe like you said, you don't have an immediate booking to book the time in the calendar, but you have to, wait for somebody to reach out to you before you have that call. Then you get on the call, and then you have this SDR trying to qualify you and still not showing you the demo, right?
Crazy.
And finally, maybe you have that chance to talk to the account executive who shows you the product, only to realize that that product may not be a good fit, and that they could have just told you that on the chat or on their copy,
Exactly.
right? And I think just doing it, uh, just going through your own buying journey, I think it makes a lot of sense. And if we talk about the steps, the many steps that happen, and many steps that happen before that website visit, and checking out that vendor, and talking about awareness, talking about demand generation, and the content that, like you said, needs to be should better be optimized for consumption on that channel, for local
Mm-hmm.
consumption. I think it just it's just this mindset of in B2B marketing that everything needs a click, a download, it needs a CTA, right? A call to action. And I think, so many B2B marketers would benefit from just dropping that. Like, just think about it this way. Somebody told me, like, imagine that if it takes whatever, how many touches for your buyer before they are going to be maybe interested in your brand, or before you can build that trust. Let's say that's 10, 15, I don't know, number is going to be high. But how many? So let's say they need to, maybe, let's say you talk about LinkedIn, maybe they need to read your 10 posts before they really, you start really building some sort of trust with them. But how many posts need to be created before they read them, right? So maybe I need to create 200 posts so that I see 40 of them, so that they actually read 10 of them. So even that is already,
Right.
quite difficult. And then if you're not really, you have finally have their attention, and then you make them jump through hoops, and you make them like click through so that they can actually find and read the information. I'm sorry, but nobody does that
Yeah.
anymore. People just don't do this anymore, because like you said, there is plenty of people on LinkedIn and brands that are actually sharing useful content that you can consume, because that's what people want. They came to LinkedIn. They didn't come to LinkedIn so that they can visit somebody's website and have to go through all of that hell that we
Yep.
describe, clicking away banners and all of that thing. And by the way, like, and then you get it on your mobile, and it's not optimized for mobile, so you can't really read, and you have to scroll from left to right, and and then a pop-up comes, and
Yeah.
you're done, right? So optimizing for that consumption is a big thing. And I think one such a such a simple and practical opportunity that people completely disregard is on a platform like LinkedIn, not only that you have actually managed to educate your buyers, which is the role of marketing at the end, right? It's about educating buyers, not about clicks. Um, Not only that you have fulfilled your purpose as marketing, let's say, but also you have this unique feature of LinkedIn, which is if somebody engages with your content by commenting or liking, or maybe checking out your profile, you can actually see that. So speaking of intent data, a lot of people speak, especially in the ABM community, about intent data. I don't think it gets better than that. Like seeing the actual buyer and their reaction, it's a perfect opportunity to start a conversation and start building that relationship. Because at the end, especially when you're selling into enterprise, into larger companies, and you have multiple buyers, even if that one buyer, your champion, let's say, has booked even that call with you, and you had your account executive have a call with them, it doesn't mean that you're maybe not even in the running, because like maybe there are other people and other concerns, other things you don't even know are happening that may exclude you. And so what I'm trying to say is so important to be proactively building relationship, not just with that one person, but the complete buying
Mm.
committee, And this is what LinkedIn is so important and so good to do it, a platform to do it on, much better than anywhere
Agreed.
else.
Agreed. Well, let me ask you a point of question, then let's move on from this one. But if, from all the clients that you've worked with, what are the 1 to 2 things you find most impactful from a friction perspective? If you were to address and say, hey, these are the things we constantly see that when corrected can create the largest impact. And I'm sure there's some, it depends here or there, but some things that maybe you guys have seen working with your clients where you've addressed it and you've seen that the positive impact is really high, right? And thinking about it almost like an ICE model. Are there 1 to 2 things that kind of stand out to you if someone were to prioritize out of this long list? Because there's lots of things, right? There's lots of different little things that we can change, but anything that stands out to you?
I mean, I think fixing these very basic things, like you mentioned, for example, using maybe some tools. If you need to pre-qualify your prospects, there are tools that you can use to do that, without the long forms and without the necessity of your SDR having to, speak to them, right? So actually skipping all of those steps and making sure that they book the call in the I think this is such an easy,
Mm,
quick win. I think another one is, and it's a big source of friction actually in a lot of companies, and that is appropriate action for appropriate
mm,
trigger, right? So if somebody has, there is a lot of discussion, I should ungate all of your content and, all of these things to generate demand so that they can just read the content. And that's not necessarily true, right? But what you don't want to do is that if somebody downloads the content, it's not, it's not a sales intent, it's not a buying intent, right? So it doesn't make sense to send them to sales, right? That's inappropriate action based on that trigger. And you can still do stuff with people who join your webinar, download your content. You can still keep engaging them. You can connect to them. You can, educate them, all of these things, right? But that's an appropriate action. If somebody likes your post on LinkedIn, it's not appropriate to pitch them. If somebody connects to you, of course, like we all
mm,
experience, it's not appropriate to pitch them, right? So just doing this appropriate action based on their previous behavior can have such a huge such a huge impact. So suddenly, instead of annoying people, you can actually start sourcing maybe your SDRs with accounts that are engaged, that have, like, if I go, we use Albacross as a tool to just kind of IP tracking, see which accounts are visiting our site. Every day I can go there, I can see a bunch of accounts that have been, like, they're a right fit. They've spent like an hour on the website, check high intent pages. Maybe 3 people from the or 5 sometimes from the target account have been checking out our website, but haven't booked the call yet, right? Why? I don't know. We don't know, right? Maybe they haven't found the information they were looking for. Maybe they're asking themselves,
yeah.
who the F are these guys, right? I don't know why, right? But probably also maybe there is stuff inside a company, other people who have the influence who are, saying maybe it's just not the right time. So there's all these things that may be happening, but this is definitely a nice trigger for the SDR teams to start connecting to the target buyers, to also start influencing the other uh, members of the buying committee, start having conversation, asking them about, you know, starting conversation, of course, asking them about what they're trying to achieve and all these things. And this little change in the way that then, for example, the SDR team is doing their job and how marketing is collaborating with SDR on that can also have a huge
Mm.
impact.
I love your point, and you picked up. I'm glad you said it. But the appropriate trigger for the appropriate type of form fill, if you want to make it about form fills. But to your point, I mean, the majority of the argument around gated is bad is due to the fact that people have always seen gated as a way to drive leads directly to sales, and so they were just MQLing
Yes.
the leads, quote
Yeah.
unquote, way too quickly. And so, of course, you're going to see conversion rates much lower than a demo request. I mean, that I've never seen it the other way around. I don't think that exists. And so, that analysis is interesting to do. And it is worthwhile because what that analysis is showing you is that when you do pass leads that aren't ready to talk to sales, they don't want to talk to sales and they don't close at high rates. And so that should be obvious, even just even if you didn't look at the data, right? You just took a step back and said, this doesn't make sense. However, there's nothing, and I think to maybe continue on the one line too, is that, if you just created a table and said, hey, here are all the different types of ways that people interact with us. Maybe it's a webinar, maybe it's the newsletter, maybe it's a piece of content, a template, a demo form, etc. And then you align with both sales and marketing. You said, hey, here are the things that we're going to do when people interact by these types of content and or forms. Then you'd already have things a lot more aligned, and you start to realize that, wait a minute, like, why is the action the same for everything? Because sometimes it is for a lot of companies. And then you have to ask yourself, well, should it be? What was the intent behind someone reading our content or listening in a webinar? Was the intent to buy software right now? Probably not. Maybe. And I'm sure there's always a couple of people that are closer to the end, right? And so you always have a couple that come through, which is, I think, what keeps people interested in passing them to sales, is because they don't have a lot of leads coming in, and it's an easy way to say, hey, we did our job, we've met our number, take a look, and these are good. But I think the difficulty with that is when you're sending people to sales that are not ready to talk to sales, it could be detrimental for your brand, because then you start to think about the actions that are taken after by the sales team, not really their fault in a way. It's more the design of the process flow of what's identified as an MQL and when it gets passed. But then they're going out and saying, hey, I've got my get a demo email sequence ready. I've got my calls. I've got the mobile phone number or whatever. And now you're getting spammed pretty hard by these people when all you really wanted is, you said, hey, I like the content. It was pretty good. It was interesting. I'd love to read some more. Right. And if you just treated the customer like that, then I bet you that they would become a customer way faster than if you said, you know what? Nope, we need it now. And you need to get on a demo and I'll give you $100 gift card to do it right now. And I think that's so important to make sure that those journeys are aligned. And it's easy to do, like whether you put it in a spreadsheet or somewhere else, and just put yourself in the mind of the buyer, right? If you did the same action, what would you do? How would you want to be treated? And I think if we just kind of look at it that way and make it really simple, then you create much better experiences for people.
No, I love that you bring it up. I just saw Gaetano the other day was sharing a video about exactly, doing that audit or, just a meeting between sales and marketing, listing all the possible intents or actions that the buyers can take, and like what's actually the level of intent, what is the next appropriate action. And I like it because it's so much more nuanced than, making broad sweep statements like, no, we should just kind of ungate all our content and just like educate buyers and then sit back and wait for them to come, versus the other camp, which is like very aggressive, going outbound to whomever, whatever they do, just jumping on top of them. And there is all these possibilities in between. And this is the right discussion to have, instead of, should we do this or should we do that? It's more like, okay, based on the action or the behavior, the trigger, what is the next appropriate action? So you took this example of a webinar. I mean, webinar is really a great opportunity to connect to the attendees beforehand and start already a conversation about what they're expecting to learn, making sure that you're actually addressing the questions that they have. And then, of course, using that information not only to drive a better webinar, but also drive the conversations after that. Just following up after the webinar with engaged customers. I mean, there's so many things that you can do both from your sales and your marketing team. You can also, like from marketing, like you said, you can, share, select content that is very appropriate to basically continue the education experience. And share that with the customer. So we call them content hubs, but it's really just kind of a collection of different content that we share after each and every webinar. You can include more middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, like product information. It's fine, as long as you give people the choice to either continue the education, etc. And that, in addition, thinking about collaboration between sales and marketing, these are additional touch points and also data points, because suddenly somebody has attended the webinar, checked out your content, and maybe checked out product information. So now the more appropriate action could be to start a conversation about it,
Sure.
right? Instead of just, looking at it black and white, we'll give them the space, they will reach out to us, or we just reach out to everybody and propose them a demo. And, it's been so many times. And because, again, there's many things that happen and why they might not reach out to you yet, but it happens so many times that I just reached out after a webinar, or maybe even just simple content engagement, without really offering them a demo of our product or our service. Just, what I like to do sometimes is just record a quick video, right? I go for a walk. I happen to live near the beach, so it's always a cool video, right? And I just say, did you, what did you think of the webinar? Did you find anything that you is worth implementing? I'm not sure if you saw, but we also prepared additional resources, something
Yeah.
like that. You have somebody who is engaged, who is asking questions. You can offer to answer. Maybe you didn't get to answer all of their questions. That's actually how we generated one of the opportunities. We're just offering, hey, I saw you had all these questions. We didn't get to all of them, but I'll be happy to, go through the questions with you if you want to book a call, right? And this is what happened. And it actually was a sale at the end. It was a sales discovery
Yeah.
call, and there was an opportunity coming out of that. So I love the nuance in appropriate trigger, appropriate action for an appropriate behavior, appropriate
Well, I
trigger.
think too, to add to it, I think you said it really well, honestly. But I think the other thing too is that it's not that you can't reach out to someone or engage with someone who
Mm.
has consumed a piece of content, whether that be the webinar, a gated piece, etc. And so, some actual things that you said I think are important to repeat. And then one I wanted to add to as well that I know I think I've seen you post about as well. But it's okay, great. They've engaged with the webinar, they've engaged with the content. Now I can connect with them on LinkedIn. So now they're seeing more of your content already. And you could just engage with them in general, to your point, with a video, or just say, like, hey, really hope you enjoy the webinar. Let me know if you have any questions, that type of thing. Nice and simple. There's no pitch. There's nothing about the company itself. You're just being a helpful conduit of making sure that they got some value from it, right? That too. And, you as a content creator, you want to learn, right? You want to learn what things worked
Yes.
really well and what things maybe you want to double down on more. And so I think that's important. The other thing too that I really love is, especially with webinars or really any type of webinars are best because they're a little more engaging when you've got people there versus say someone just downloading some content. But the other thing is like do a content collaboration with them, right? So maybe you find 5 to
Oh yeah.
10 of your top customers that attended your webinar and you say, hey, I would love to do, say, a 30-minute slot where we talk about XYZ pain point and then just go deep into it. And so what it does is it accomplishes a couple of things. One, if they've got a bigger brand than you, all of a sudden you're getting some brand rep just from having your brands together, which is really powerful. Two, you're also building a relationship with them at the same time. And so you get to have a good conversation. There's probably some prep work to it. And then you get to have a conversation, obviously, on the webinar itself. And then you get the repurposing side of saying, okay, now I can get this content out into the public eye after it's already been released. And so now you see your brand everywhere with this maybe other big brand that is a good fit for you. And whether they buy from you or not, the people that are similar to them are going to look and say, oh, wow, I didn't know that they're talking to this brand. I know that brand. And so now by association, you kind of play into the familiarity bias, which means, okay, I'm familiar with full funnel. I see OmniLab with full funnel. I trust Vlad's stuff. I like Andre. Maybe I should also trust Jonathan, see what he has to say. And so those things really do happen all the time. And so like, that's a great example of like saying, hey, maybe we don't need to come in hot with a get a demo CTA and email them and cold call them and go really hard. We could still engage with them. It's just kind of adjusting, making slight adjustments to the approach. Now, if someone asks for a demo, then the same thing's true of your point earlier, which is aligning what the buyer wants based off the CTA they clicked. And so, as you know all too well, we see it all the time when those leads all go to SDRs, of which are never giving the demo. Now, I have heard some are, but many times they're not. They're not
Crazy.
trained to do a demo and they're trained to typically do qualification call, make sure they're a good fit for the client. So they don't waste the AE's time, right? But why don't we think about wasting the customer's time too, to your point, right? Let's think about
Yes.
that because no one wants to be in that situation. If I can figure out very quickly that this isn't a good tool for me, I want to know that early on. So
And you as a sales at the end, also as a sales director or whomever, you want
yeah,
that as well. You don't want to waste time on prospects that will never
exactly.
buy. And I love also that you mentioned content collaborations. It's like one of those tools that is not a lot of brands are using that, and it can be used, like you said, you can associate yourself with a brand that may be, better known. You kind of get you tap into their own. It's like, I think I always think of like a rock concert, and then you have the opening act, or how is it
Yeah.
called, right? So the smaller band performing before the
Right.
bigger
Yeah.
band. And so it's kind of an endorsement. Well, first of all, you get access to their audience, but also you get a kind of an
Exactly.
endorsement. And the fastest way, and this is something like they know in the music business, and I guess in the movie business, and but it works in every business, is like the fastest way for you to grow your audience and your credibility is to tap into an existing audience and credibility. And the easiest way to do that is through content collaborations, through conversations like the one that you and I are having right now. Like at the beginning, when we started as an unknown brand 3 years ago, we did a lot of partner webinars. So we partnered with MarTech brands that were known in the market. For them, it was good. They had access to some of our audience. They always look for opportunities to share good content, by the way. And for us, of course, it was good because we were associated with those brands. And then you speak to others in the industry, the thought leaders, and all of them. And that really, I remember, in a few months, Andre did a bunch of those webinars, and in a few months, it was like more than 5,000 new people added to our audience and the email list, and I mean, opt-in, right? And a few deals right off the bat. Like, it was amazing how well it worked, content collaborations. And then there is another way to use content collaborations, and that is actually as part of your account-based marketing. You can interview the target buyers, right? You can actually, for strategic accounts, you can actually go and speak to them. So one of our clients was like in a very niche market. So it's like heating districts, right? So very, very,
Right.
very
Yeah.
niche, right? And they have this like very techy solution that saves them a bunch of energy. And so the question was like, how can we get, and they had, I believe, like in one region, they had a list of 50 tier one accounts,
Mm.
like highest value accounts, and then maybe another 100. It was like very small numbers. And so we set up a content collaboration. It was kind of a market industry
Mm.
report, right? And they could use that. They booked 17 conversations with 17 of their target accounts. Then, the, of course, each and every conversation was a relationship building. Each and every conversation gave them unique insights into what's going on in those accounts. Do they already have a solution? What are their top challenges, and what are the priorities, right? And if nothing else, like the worst thing that happened was suddenly their salesperson and that buyer became connected on LinkedIn, and the buyer started following them on LinkedIn, right? And then after that, they created kind of like a webinar where they shared exclusive insights from this industry report. And because it's a niche industry, it was actually very unique and was very good content as well. They had like 300 people. Like, it was crazy for a niche market like that. And this was the highest attendance rate I have ever seen, right? A lot of times companies are going to be, or marketers are going to be, yeah, but I'm in my market, this is not going to work. I have conservative buyers. But actually, this may be an opportunity. There are no watering holes, so you can create a
Exactly.
watering hole, right? So yeah, I remember, like, I will never forget this. Like, I was working for a client, like, before we started Full Funnel, spent a lot of time with them, and actually visited one of their customers. So they were also in manufacturing, and I visited the
Mm.
factory, right? It was like a cereal factory. And what happened during that visit was that their customers, so the factory owner, the CEO and the CIO of that production plant, gave a tour. They spent like hours giving a tour of their facility and how they implemented my client solution, software solution for manufacturing, to their prospects. Imagine
That's cool.
that. And I was like, man, I asked the CEO, like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you spending, like, you're there. If anybody's busy, they're busy people. Like, they
Right.
always have some fires to put out, like on the floor, on the shopping floor, on the shop floor. And so, and he said, you know what? Like, it's very lonely. Like, I don't never have the opportunity. It's not like you and me, and in our market, there's like tons of stuff happening. You can just feel overwhelmed with the amount of opportunities to network, to connect to each other, to learn from each other, right? In those niche industries, this doesn't happen, right? And so when you can create that opportunity, like he said, we are lonely. I spend this time because this is for me a unique opportunity to
Right.
exchange, to see what my peers are doing, right? Imagine that he spent all of that time. So if you can create and bring those people together, you're creating a lot of value. And by the way, you're claiming a kind of thought leadership position in that industry because nobody else is
Right.
doing that, right? Suddenly you're the one who has the quote unquote media, whatever that is, whatever that means,
Right.
right? Whether it's a podcast, whether that's, series of webinars, it doesn't really matter, right? And I'm sorry, I'm a bit passionate
I love
about this.
it. I love it. Keep
So-
going. Keep going.
Oh, no. But basically wanting to highlight what you mentioned as content collaborations can be extremely powerful, both in terms of you growing your audience and your brand and credibility, authority, brand recognition, right? Reputation maybe. And then also as a tool to connect to strategic accounts, to maybe create these new channels, watering holes, niche media, where you're bringing your customers together and actually, creating a unique channel instead of maybe throwing, like in that case, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for them to throw a lot of, budget on LinkedIn ads and then wonder whether they would be able to even reach that audience, which is so niche. And, how active are they on LinkedIn
Well,
anyway?
I think you're right. I think sometimes people just think that everyone's going to come inbound, right? And not everyone's going to come inbound, especially in
Yeah.
the enterprise space. But back to your point, I mean, there's like literally no reason. I mean, if I had a list of, if my ABM list was 10, 15, 20, whatever the list size is, let's just say it's under
Yeah.
100, right? Because clearly that would be a huge list for ABM.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's literally no reason why you shouldn't have at least one relationship with every single one of those accounts by purely either doing a podcast, webinar, an AMA, live, not live. It doesn't really matter what format it is, honestly, as long as it's recorded and you can do something with the recording after from a content perspective. So the idea of like, well, I don't know why they're not coming. Why isn't Coca-Cola coming inbound? I mean, it's been forever. We've been spending all this money on LinkedIn ads and Google and here or there. And it's like, have we not reached out to them? And I'm not talking about cold calls and just like demo requests. Have we not reached out to them to just build a relationship and build content together and get our brands together doing something that might even benefit the both of us? If not purely just be a pull on someone's ego, right? Where everyone likes to talk, everyone likes to be invited on things, included, whether it be a webinar or podcast. And so, the success rates of those are going to be a lot higher than you going after and saying, like, hey, want to buy right now? And so I just don't understand. There's literally no excuse because the amount of effort, it's just not that high. It's not that there's not that
No,
there's not
no,
that much
no.
work that needs to happen to make this stuff work. And so to me, it's like anytime we were working with an enterprise client, we're always talking about, and we don't advise kind of to the scale that you guys are getting into it. But it's always like, all right, what are you guys doing in terms of content collaboration? Do you do anything with these accounts right now today? And I mean, the answer is almost always no. And I just don't get it. And the answers I usually get
Yes.
are, hey,
Yeah.
bandwidth, it's time. And I'm like, I mean, a little bit of time. You can frankly ask probably GPT a handful of questions, at least get you like 50% of the way on an outline. And then all you need is an hour or so to go on a call once a week. And you could interview 52 accounts over the course of a year or more if you want to go faster and get people on and then redistribute that content through paid. And so we're organic. We're both.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
get it out through personal
Yeah.
channels
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Both.
ideally both, right? Because a lot of times, when you've got a really strong organic presence on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever the channel is where your audience is hanging out, putting paid use on it is only going to make things work a lot better. So yeah, I love we should do a whole episode on content collaboration. I think next time. This is a good one.
I think so.
Yeah.
Definitely. No, but I think it comes down to two kind of fundamental problems that I see very often with companies, B2B companies, B2B marketing teams. Like the first one is kind of copy paste marketing. What I mean by that is, okay, we should be doing X because the LinkedIn thought leaders say that we should
Exactly.
be doing that, or because our competitors are doing that, etc. Right? So it's not done. Like nobody's doing this, so we shouldn't do it either, right? And that's a big problem, right? Because at the end, the goal of marketing should be to make your brand stand out. Standing out means being different, right? So that's just the opposite
I
of
love it.
copy paste. And then there is another thing, and I think a lot of people, it just comes back down. I always kind of put it in the same bucket as we don't want to talk to our customers, we don't want to bother our customers. There is like this fear that I see very often. We don't want to go reach out to our customers to interview them for our GTM, ICP, whatever we are doing. We don't want to do this for content collaboration. Why would they say yes? And just the opposite is true. It's actually easier to get them to say yes. I mean, I'm talking about like 20-30% of target accounts saying yes to a content collaboration, in many cases. And what is your response rate normally? Like 2 or
Exactly.
3%, maybe
Maybe.
on the cold
Maybe.
outreach. Maybe. And creating a memorable experience, actually, building a real relationship, creating, getting to know each other, and creating a really unique experience. And it doesn't have to be difficult. I mean, the example that I gave was maybe 3 weeks of outreach and interviews, and then bam, uh, they had a lot of already material for LinkedIn posts. Then bam, they did a webinar. Then they had more material that they could repurpose. Then they turned that into a report. Bam, another unique piece of content they could like distribute and again chop it up and then repurpose it as LinkedIn. It's just like amazing. It's endless. And it doesn't even have to be like this. Like this was okay industry report, but I had a client who did uh, this. I thought this was genius. That was his idea. It's genius. And by the way, we're talking about his customers were like
Hmm.
pharmaceutical companies, not the most, very conservative market. Let me put
Right.
it like
Right.
that. And he did a LinkedIn newsletter, where he would feature one buyer each week. That was it. That was the concept. And people loved it. They went in and okay, you're going to feature me. Career people, they like, their ego. And it worked really
That's
well. And
great.
what is the effort of creating a
I
LinkedIn
love
newsletter,
that.
right? I mean, yeah.
That's an awesome story. No, because that's the point. I think sometimes we just overcomplicate these things and make it too big a thing. I think other times, and we're gonna have to call it because I could talk to you for probably another 3 hours at some point here.
Oh
But
yeah.
this is a great conversation. I think we're gonna have to do something again. But just to comment on your last point, I mean, there's so many low hanging fruit types of ideas that would not require a lot of effort. And granted, like you do have to get over the hurdles sometimes because people do have to sell these things up internally to the CEO, CFO if they're going to be utilizing their time and or budget to do some of these things. And so sometimes the issue, of course, is if you've got a very short-term mindset, CEO, which I mean, short-term and long-term goals are both important, right? Clearly. But if there's things that you're talking about where there's not a direct line like, hey, we're going to do 5 webinars and then we're going to get how many demos out of that? If there's that type of conversation, then we need to kind of stop everything right there and make sure we kind of just talk about the mindset of like what the goal of this is. And so you're going to have to get past that. And that's not, it's not trivial for some companies. I get that that's definitely difficult because I've had those
Yeah.
conversations. So you can either work with them, try to paint a better picture. And there's a whole bunch of ideas we could talk about in another podcast around that. Or, you find another company that's a little more open to those types of strategies where it's going to allow you to be more successful in your role, which I think is really important, right? Like we all have the power to take control as marketers and put ourselves in the best roles possible. And so maybe that's not realistic to do this month or maybe even next month, right? Because we have families, expenses, all sorts of things on the line. But you can definitely find those companies because they're out there that are more open to these types of approaches. So, but
No, but I think we should definitely do one on in getting the buy-in,
100%, that'd be a
right?
good one.
Because
That'd
like,
be a good one.
yeah, I mean, it's something that we face I'm sure you face it
Oh
as
yeah,
well, right? With your clients, it's something we have to solve over and over again. We build a lot of processes around that. And, I think what would also be interesting to get an enterprise salesperson for example, Ryan Staley or
Sure.
anybody, right, that who has that experience, because they're also expert in getting the buy-in from the buyers, of course, as part of the
Exactly.
sales. When they have to navigate these complex buying committees and all of that, and getting consensus and getting their
Right.
buy-in, of course, for sales purpose. But I think we can learn a lot from each
I love it.
other.
I
I
love it.
think we should
We'll definitely
definitely
do
do
it.
one
Yeah, I'll
about
reach
that.
back
Yeah.
out. But well, cool, my friend. Well, for those who want to reach out to you, I assume fullfunnel.io is the one place if anyone's interested in all things you guys do, ABM, mapping the customer journey, finding points of friction, really thinking about things from a holistic standpoint, and then clearly finding you on LinkedIn. And I was going to pronounce your last name, but I did not want to butcher it. So would you mind saying and spelling it out so people can find you on LinkedIn?
Well, I'm sure you'll also include it in a show notes so
Of
that
course.
people can
Of
find it.
course.
But yeah, my name is Vladimir Blagojević. You don't have to learn how to pronounce that. But you can find me on LinkedIn if you just type in fullfunnel.io, and there you will find Andre, myself. We post daily on LinkedIn. You can always reach out to us. If you mention, that will be a bonus. If you mention that you heard me on this show with
There you go.
Jonathan, I would love to hear that and share also with
Yeah.
Jonathan this bit, and I would love to hear also what you thought of it. And thank you very much. I mean, this was such a nice conversation. Like you said, we have to
Oh,
stop, but
always,
I think we could go
always.
on
Yeah,
for
it's a pleasure,
hours.
man. And next time in Spain, I will 100% hit you up once we have a little more time. Just too much crazy Switzerland travel, but we'll call there, my friend. Until the next time, and on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of the Demand Podcast. Again, I'm Jonathan Bland, the co-founder of Omni Lab. I'll also have with me Jason Steele, who's the other co-founder of Omni Lab on this podcast as well. We're a demand gen agency for seed to Series B SaaS startups. If you like this episode, or you're looking for some help with demand gen, please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn over a DM, or you can go just directly to our website. That's omnilabconsulting.com. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you on the next episode, where we'll be talking about all things demand gen. Until then, thanks. Bye-bye.